Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Good evening, Maverick family. Good evening, new viewers. Let me get that slide off my face. There, it's a little bit better. Now I can see you. You can see me. Well, I can't see you, not right now, not unless you click the video link later to get onto the show live with your webcam, if we go that route, instead of just with the phone system. But we'll see where that leads tonight. What are we going to talk about? Well, we will bring you up to date in a moment on the search for that missing Titanic tourism sub or submersible, and explain what's happening there. We have the latest information. We will talk about censorship tonight in the face of more YouTube channel banning. We will talk about the economy. We will talk about Ukraine. We will talk about the huge money pit that Ukraine has become as the Ukraine Recovery Conference wraps up with world leaders talking about getting Ukraine back on track while still at war. So all of that and more coming up here in the Maverick News channel. I'm not sure exactly where the show is going to go tonight, but I guarantee you this, I'll do my best to keep you engaged and give you information that is useful to you as we try to get you all closer to the truth. Don't go away.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
We're back. So the search for the missing submersible that was on an undersea tour taking rich people essentially down to see the wreckage of the Titanic continues tonight. And they've shifted their focus, as many of you probably already know, the focus of their search to a different area where they heard knocking sounds. Those sounds detected, as I understand it, from or by a Canadian surveillance aircraft that was aiding in the search off the coast of Newfoundland. So a U.S. Navy portable crane system capable of bringing up large items from as deep as 20,000 feet has arrived in St. John's, Newfoundland, but it's waiting to be welded onto a chartered ship so it can be taken to the search area for the missing submersible. And time is running out because when they left on their short tour, they had 96 hours of oxygen available. And of course, a lot of time has passed since then. And it isn't clear to me exactly how much time they might have left. I'm just checking here. So we know, I don't know exactly when, but I do know that the oxygen is due to run out sometime tomorrow morning. So the efforts are ramping up. Interesting vehicle, that Titan submersible. The company that operates it did a bunch of interviews with different media outlets, including an ABC affiliate out of Seattle, KOMO or Como. And believe it or not, they showed that they navigate the thing with a PlayStation game controller. I also saw an interview sometime back where they showed that they were getting some of the things that they use on the vessel from Campers World, which can be totally okay, I guess, if everything works, right? And I'm not saying that that's the source of the problem, but it is interesting how, you take a vessel like that and they're using sort of off the shelf technology combined with, stuff that they're custom making to create this vessel that is capable of diving to incredible depths. The Titanic is so far down on the ocean floor that I looked it up, and it's not. There is 6,000 pounds per square inch of pressure down there. If you've ever, everybody has gone swimming in like a swimming pool with maybe a 6 or 6.5 foot depth, right? And you go down to the bottom of that pool and you can feel the pressure on your head, even just 6 feet under. The Titanic. I'll just look it up again to see if I get the exact, make sure I get the depth right. How far down is the Titanic? Yeah, it is at a depth of about 12,500 feet or 3,800 meters. That's 2,100 fathoms. And it's broken into two main sections, 600 meters apart. So that is 2.4 miles down. 2.4 miles. So you go down for 2.5 miles all the way down. So can you imagine the pressure? You can't begin to comprehend how much pressure that is. I can tell you that if you just went down there with no protective equipment or anything, your body would just be crushed. It's like having, it's been described as having about 42 elephants standing on you, stacked, 42 elephants stacked on top of each other. But of course, at that depth, it isn't that they just stand on one part of you. That's every part of your body with that kind of pressure on you all at the same time. 42 elephants standing all over you. You're instantly crushed. You can't withstand the pressure. So they have to have special submersible vehicles to go down that far. And even to affect some sort of rescue or even recovery operation at that depth, you need special equipment, you need time. I don't know what they'll do, even once they find the vessel and they've heard the knocking sound. So I'm no expert in this area, and I'm sure that there has been a lot of media, or there has been a lot of media attention focused on it. But I don't know. It's they've got a real challenge on their hands if they're down on the ocean floor at that depth. Don't know what they're going to do. So cross your fingers, hope for the best, folks, and pray for these folks. An adventure has turned into something of a nightmare, a horror story, and hopefully they find a way to rescue those people. So let's move on to other news this evening. The Ukraine Recovery Conference in London has attracted world leaders from all over the globe, from the West. And I'm just going to pick up some of that for you now. It begins now with this, I would call it a promotional video, where these world leaders are talking about the war in Ukraine and efforts to restore this conduit into Russia historically in the aftermath of current battles and as the war there continues and rages on. So here we go. Let's pick it up. Hang on. Hang on. Here we go. And we're going to be starting here. They're just getting ready, and their promo video should roll in just a second. And then Zelensky, we've got him to speak here too. All this happening while Joe Biden, just coming off the comments from Joe Biden, where he was meeting with supporters, donors, I believe out in California, and he said that he views the threat of Russia possibly using tactical nuclear weapons as very, very real. Those statements alone show that this conflict is escalating, and we know that nuclear weapons have been moved into position in Belarus, which just gives rise to even more concern and makes me wonder why they aren't more aggressive about engaging in peace talks instead of ramping things up. Here we go. And we're coming back in here now. Just give it a second. The Ukraine Recovery Conference. Sorry for the delay.
Kyiv, 2022. Fear, pain, despair, anger. Russia's relentless bombings will not stop us. We defend democracy and all our values against Russia's attacks. We rebuild our houses and cities. We clear landmines and sow life. We bring light back into every house and build new bridges. In spite of everything, we love and dream. We fight, we transform, and work for Ukraine. We are rebuilding better and greener, using
Build back
best
better.
of Ukrainian and global innovation. And every day we look to our future with pride and confidence. United in defense, united in recovery. We build Ukraine.
After they blew it up with war.
Please welcome the Right Honourable James Cleverly MP, Secretary Dmytro, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
So we'll listen to a little bit of this off the top.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. There are over 1,000 public and private sector decision makers here. Governments
Public-private
representing 61
partnerships.
states, 33 international organizations, over 400 businesses, and 130 civil society organizations.
And a lot of money to be
After
made.
nearly 18 months of Ukraine withstanding Russian full-scale invasion, the international community is coming together today with a shared belief and confidence in Ukraine's future.
And the
Russia's full-scale invasion
quest
has
for profits.
caused untold suffering, but Ukraine is rebuilding now.
The opportunity for
offers
investment
an
is here.
opportunity not only to repair what was lost, but to stride forward and to rebuild an economy that is more modern, more open, greener,
right up.
and more resilient. When I visited Kyiv recently, I could see the construction equipment, the JCBs, already visible everywhere.
Government contracts
This
galore
URC
available now.
is about unlocking Ukraine's potential, supporting Ukraine's immediate recovery needs, and unlocking a private sector-led recovery.
Wow.
After the sacrifices and suffering of the war, Ukrainians are planning for a better future. And it is in the interests of the world that that country, the one that they rebuild, should be stronger than ever, integrated into global markets and self-reliant. So, ladies and gentlemen,
opportunities
please
are limitless.
join me in welcoming to the stage my Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Thank you.
There's never been a better time to invest your cash.
Good morning and welcome to the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Now, before this terrible war, Ukraine's economy was becoming a huge investment opportunity. It was the breadbasket of Europe, exporting millions of tons of food and grain each month. A top 5 exporter of iron ore and steel, a leader in energy, pushing forward renewables, hydrogen and electric vehicles, and a startup nation, which helped spark names like PayPal, WhatsApp, and Revolut,
biotechnology,
with a thriving tech sector, which actually had a record year in 2022.
Research
because the truth is, that opportunity is still there today. In fact, the war has only proved how much Ukraine has to offer. When I visited Kyiv last November, I saw this for myself. I saw Ukraine's incredible spirit. A spirit, yes, of strength and defiance, but also of ingenuity and innovation. In a converted office block, I met tech experts, civilian and military, who were working together to find new ways to bolster the country's defenses. They were networking mobile phones so that people across Ukraine could download an app which would allow their phone to pick up the sound of the Shahed drones and feed back the location so that Ukrainian air defense could track them and shoot them down. During the winter, Russia tried to destroy Ukraine's energy grid. By February, over 40% of power generation was down. But now, because of that incredible ingenuity and defiance, Ukraine has got the grid back online, and they're even able to start exporting electricity back to Europe. As we've seen in Bakhmut and Mariupol, what Russia cannot take, it will seek to destroy. They want to do the same to Ukraine's economy. And the scale of the challenge is real. The war brought a 29% fall in Ukraine's GDP last year. But just look at the streets of Kyiv. Despite the threat of attack, people are getting on with their lives and getting on with business. President Zelensky's government is determined to drive reforms to become more open, more transparent, and ready for investment. This is a vibrant, dynamic, creative European country that refuses to be subdued. So together with our allies, we will maintain our support for Ukraine's defense and for the counteroffensive. We will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes for them to continue and to win this war. We'll also stand with them as they win the peace and harness all of that ingenuity and defiance to build the future that they deserve. The question for us today is, what can we do to support this, to fast-track recovery and help Ukraine unleash its potential? It's clear Russia must pay for the destruction that they've inflicted. So we're working with allies to explore lawful routes to use Russian assets. And on Monday, we published new legislation to allow us to keep sanctions in place until Russia pays up. But beyond that, we must bring to bear a partnership of governments, international financial institutions, and business leaders, all of us here today, to make this happen. The British government will continue to play its full part, and I'm proud that today we're announcing a multi-year commitment to support Ukraine's economy. Over 3 years, we will provide loan guarantees worth $3 billion. We're also launching a new UK-Ukraine tech bridge to foster investment and talent, along with support for green energy and more, all part of a vast collective effort from allies and partners around the world, including significant new support from the EU, which is also being announced this week. Financial institutions are playing their part. The IMF is putting $15 billion into Ukraine over the next 4 years as part of a $115 billion commitment by the G7 and its partners. And institutions like the EBRD are providing seed capital to support private sector-led growth. Because above all, we must build a platform for business. Only they can truly crowd in the innovation and investment that Ukraine needs. And that's why we're launching the Ukraine Business Compact, for the private sector to pledge their support for Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. And I am delighted to announce today that over 400 businesses from 38 countries with a combined market cap of $4.9 trillion have now signed up. Now, the City of London has a huge amount to offer in their deep and liquid capital markets and world-class finance expertise. So there is no better place to announce today the new London Conference Framework for War Risk Insurance. This is a huge step forward towards helping insurers to underwrite investments into Ukraine, removing one of the biggest barriers and giving investors the confidence they need to act. With this and everything that we do here, we are sending a message that our support on the battlefield and beyond cannot be outlasted, and that Ukraine's incredible spirit will prevail. Now, in a moment, I'll hand over to my friend, President Zelensky. But first, I'd just like to share something that I heard recently. It's about a Ukrainian soldier fighting to defend Bakhmut. He was stationed in an empty house.
Okay. So I'll just comment on that while he rolls with the rest of his address there. This is an incredible amount of money. What you're seeing here is corporatocracy, economic fascism, the partnership between the nation states and corporations. Public-private partnerships, as they refer to them. The G7 nations committing $115 billion to rebuilding Ukraine. But the war isn't even over yet, folks. And they've spent, I don't know how many billions now. I've lost track. Making sure that the weapons went in there to destroy everything. It isn't just that Russia is destroying things there. The Ukrainians are destroying things too. The war is happening in their country. Everything is being leveled. The infrastructure has been completely blown up. That's why I'm saying these big companies, this is like a boom for them. This is an economic opportunity, a business opportunity. Huge government contracts now available for all of these big players. And who's going to pay for it? We pay for it. the money that they're earmarking, what happens to that money? They tax us, the middle class, the poor, the average people, the citizens. They take all that cash, or they just print more money, and then they issue government contracts. All these companies, and what did he say? 48 companies, or I don't remember how many, but it's from 38 different countries. So all the big corporations, construction companies, technology companies, energy companies, mining, whatever it is, whatever they decide they need to build there, they engage in these public works projects, building new roads, new buildings, new everything. The entire country has to be completely rebuilt. So these companies roll in, they get these government contracts, the governments guarantee loans which go to Ukraine. Ukraine takes out the loans. Now they've basically made slaves out of the citizens of Ukraine because they're on the hook for these loans to rebuild their country. Not to mention the loans that they're on the hook for to pay for all of the weapons, many of those weapons obsolete, taken from storage from Western countries and rolled in there. Old tanks, old F-16 jets soon. It became a dumping ground for obsolete weaponry and some new weaponry too. A lot of new weaponry, high-priced stuff. So the average citizen ends up on the hook for the tab. The tab for the destruction and the tab for the reconstruction. Destruction and reconstruction, and we pay for it all. Not just the people of Ukraine, but everybody in the West, all of the people, us, we're on the hook. Then they turn around and say that they're going to hold Russia accountable. They're going to make Russia pay. There's only one way they're going to make Russia pay. Well, two ways. Confiscation of assets, which we've been seeing, which is actually illegal under international law, frankly. Or they have to win the war and defeat Russia. That means going into Russia or defeating them in Ukraine and forcing some sort of negotiated settlement where Russia would bend the knee and say, yes, it was all our fault and we're going to pay. No, I don't think that's going to happen. And if they think they're going into Russia to effect regime change and then force Russia to pay, I think they've got another thing coming there too. Highly unlikely that will happen, even if they try to effect that. $4.9 trillion market cap for all of the companies that he mentioned that they've identified as players in this. All these companies that they know will be the ones to take advantage of these government contracts to rebuild Ukraine, restore Ukraine. They're talking about war risk insurance. In Canada, they have these Ukrainian war bonds, essentially, savings bonds. Don't recommend you invest in them. It's probably, with the rate of inflation, it's highly unlikely you will get your principal back, let alone make any money on them, if you get your money back at all at this rate, especially if we lose the war in the West. And while we wait to get here from Zelensky, I'm going to take you and show you this. So this was just, what was it, 2 days ago? Was it yesterday? Biden said that he is taking the threat of a nuclear conflict with Russia now very seriously as they've moved nuclear weapons into Belarus. So he's saying, oh, yes, it's a very serious threat. He was speaking to donors in California, and international media now picking up on this. Let me just pull this back up over here. I'm just going to run a little bit of this report to show you how other countries are taking this seriously, and we should too.
Biden, threat of Putin using nuclear weapons is real. US President Joe Biden has said that the threat of Russian President Vladimir Putin using tactical nuclear weapons is real. Biden said it in a conversation with a group of donors in California. The US president has stressed that he is concerned about Putin's possible use of nuclear weapons. When I was out here about 2 years ago saying I worried about the Colorado River drying up, everyone looked at me like I was crazy. They looked at me like when I said I worry about Putin using tactical nuclear weapons. It's real, he added. Before this, Biden called Putin's announcement that Russia had deployed its first tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus absolutely irresponsible. Last week, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said his country has started taking delivery of Russian tactical nuclear weapons, some of which he said were 3 times more powerful than the atomic bombs the US dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The deployment is Russia's first move of such warheads, shorter range, less powerful nuclear weapons that could be used on the battlefield outside Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Vadim Pristaiko, nevertheless said that Russia's nuclear threat should be taken very seriously. Russia has just under 6,000 nuclear weapons, the world's largest nuclear arsenal, and can launch its nuclear weapons from land-based missiles, from submarines, or from planes.
But what are we hearing about in Western media tonight? Not that. Mainstream media here not giving this much attention at all. Let's go back now to the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Zelensky ready to speak. Here we go.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I do see you, Rishi. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your kind words about Ukraine, about our soldiers, and thanks for your leadership and support that UK provides to Ukraine. Thank you that we are really united in defending freedom. Dear leaders of politics, business, and public opinion, dear presidents, prime ministers, ministers, secretaries, CEOs, and heads of international organizations, and of course, dear journalists. When we are talking about recovery, we are talking about millions of jobs, billions in corporate profits and trillions of GDPs, and not only for Ukraine, but for all our countries, mine and yours, countries that want and will live freely despite any predatory ambitions of various Putins whose brains are poisoned by dreams of war. Growth is always based on values, just as strong investments are preceded by trust, so that growth that we are preparing must be preceded by confidence that what has been rebuilt will not fall. And it's not about bricks, but about life in general. The world is abundant with ruins reminding us of the wars of the past. And politics in different regions, unfortunately, is abundant with sick ideas of hatred and resentment, which point to possible wars in the future. And although no one has the power to cleanse the depths of human nature from the evil that sometimes rises to the surface and destroys and kills. But you and I, and right now, we are able to protect life and overcome the ruins after the Russian aggression in such a way as to block the path for evil, meaning for any new aggressions. The eyes of the world are looking at us and at whether we will defeat Russian aggression exactly as freedom deserves to win, that is without compromising our values. Also, the world is watching to see if we will restore normal life in such a way that our transformation will land an ideological defeat on the aggressor. we protect Ukraine, and thus we protect freedom. And when we build Ukraine, we'll build freedom, country, region, continent, world. It's a global task. And I want to thank you. And of course, I thank Switzerland, Germany, France, Italy, every country where we have agreed on key principles for recovery. At this conference, we must move from vision to agreements and from agreements to real projects. There is a Ukrainian delegation in London that will present concrete things that we propose to do together. In my tour, I will outline 5 directions in which we have begun to create foundations for peace. The first is the potential of unity. The second is the potential of stability. The third is growth potential. The fourth is security potential. And the fifth, extremely important, is the potential of democracy. So the first point, we are strengthening unity. Ukraine has already succeeded in making the EU as united as it has never been before. This is truly a unity of values, which is reflected in many political, economic sanctions and humanitarian decisions. Ukraine has activated all the power of solidarity for which the EU was conceived. And Ukraine is also activating the moral force of NATO. This is important for all of us. What does the world see now? Does it recognize NATO's moral leadership in protecting peace? This is only possible with Ukraine in the alliance. Just as Ukraine already belongs to the value space of the EU, we already belong to the NATO security space, de facto. Just as Ukraine is already part of the EU's common market and on its way to full membership, we are already defending the common space of freedom in the alliance and are only waiting for the courage of the alliance leaders to recognize this reality politically. Thanks to the same values, we are developing strong bilateral alliances with such leaders of the democratic world and the United Kingdom, the USA, Canada, Japan, Australia, all the EU members. And this gives us new power in defense, economy, and global prospects for democracy. We build our alliances, and thus we are safeguarding the level of freedom to which our people are used to. Second, we are strengthening stability. At least 600 million consumers around the world directly depend on our agricultural production. This is a huge potential for food security. At the times of this war, when Russia blocked our ports and destroyed freedom of navigation in the Black and Azov seas, the world saw what Ukrainian grain is. Without it, there is the threat of price crisis and social collapse in different countries. We have now partially restored the movement of our agricultural products by sea through 2 export initiatives. And this is stability for a huge social and economic space, from Morocco to Somalia, from China to Lebanon, from Turkey to India, from Spain to Pakistan. Different aspects, different influences, but always a contribution to stability. Another similar area in the energy sector, and I believe that there is no alternative to the green transformation of the economy. And Russian aggression has proven that green transformation is one of the key foundations of security. Each strike on our energy facilities and each manifestation of Russian blackmail with the energy crisis ends the area of fossil fuel dominance and all energy habits, when entire regions could depend on a single supplier, such as Russia. It is green energy that guarantee real energy stability. Ukraine can be and will be one of the key suppliers of clean electricity and green hydrogen to Europe. The potential of this industry alone is about $400 billion. We built agricultural and energy facilities in Ukraine, and thus we are protecting the world from chaos. Third point, we strengthen the growth. There is currently no place in the world where there is a need to construct and rebuild as many objects as in Ukraine. Every new day of Russian aggression brings new ruins. Thousands and thousands of destroyed houses, devastated industries, burned lives. Recently, Russia committed also the largest crime of ecocide in the Europe by blowing up the dam and other structures of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant. What does all this mean? In Ukraine, there is the largest source of economic, industrial, and technological growth in Europe for decades and decades. And by the way, it's not only reconstruction. For example, the green transformation of energy logically stimulates the development of industries such as green metallurgy and green fertilizers. Thanks to its natural resources and industrial traditions, Ukraine can become one of the key global centers of green metallurgy. In addition, we have significant resource of critical resources for the modern economy, such as lithium. So by building with Ukraine and in Ukraine, we've handled our countries and our countries' companies from recessions. Fourth point, we strengthening security. Of course, this war demonstrates what effective defense against aggression in the modern world means, what weapons are needed, and to what extent what infrastructure is lacking, and what production is a priority, what technologies save lives on a large scale, and what systems make it possible to make science fiction a reality on the battlefield. From the production of combat drones to conventional artillery, from a near shield that covers an entire country or even a region to shelters in every school, from infrastructure that is built so that it cannot be destroyed by the Iranian Shaheeds, to cyberspace that remains resilient even in the face of constant cyber attacks. We are doing all this in Ukraine, and we need the experience of our partners in all of this. We build security together, and thus we convince the world that democracies cannot be defeated. And finally, the fifth point, democracy. Russia invaded Ukraine not only to steal our land, resources, and people. It's obvious that without Ukraine, there can be no Russian empire. And it is equally obvious that Russian bosses are very, very afraid of our democracy. Yes, why? Because democracy paves the way for the rule of law, getting rid of corruption, and to the key principle of our countries: every person matters. It's very important. And of course, democracy is in the nature of Ukrainians, and we will strengthen it anyway, no matter what they think or do in Russia. But we all have to realize that the more democracy we have, the greater is strengthened in our entire region. The more rule of law we have, the more law will work here on the eastern flank of Europe. And the more transparent Ukraine is, the uglier any corruption model will look in Russia. Even Russia's full-scale aggression has not stopped our internal reforms. Ukraine will be associated with a fair court, just as it is now associated with courage. Step by step, yes, step by step, we will get there. Thanks to digital transformation, we will show the world how the state can function effectively without any contact between an official and a citizen or a company. All public services can and will be transferred online, from business registration or social assistance to any other public service. And we are already exporting our digitalization to other regions, other countries. We have started such cooperation with Estonia, and we'll continue with Colombia and Zambia. And I'm sure that this is just the beginning. Please be sure to ask our team, our government officials, for more details about this. And this is truly an example of social progress through technology. Even before February 24th, we started dismantling the old oligarch model of economic relations from the post-Soviet period. And this is not just something about the personalities of the oligarchs. It is about changing the approach to economic relations, financial transparency and banking system resilience, market liberalization, and competition stimulation, guaranteeing equal and legal conditions for every economic entity, are all areas in which we made progress before February 24th, and of course, which are important, very important now. We build institutions and continue reforms in Ukraine, and thus we are defending democracy and preserving it as a hope for all, at least in our region, that democracy will prevail. Dear ladies and gentlemen, by building Ukraine, we are building much more than one country. We build the world as it will be during the lifetime of our generation and after us. Will it be peaceful? Will it be stable? Will it be democratic? It depends on each and every one of us. And I invite all of you to Ukraine. And by the way, Prime Minister Rishi, we have not seen each other in Kyiv for quite a while. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for your support. Thank you, UK. Slava Ukraini.
They're all applauding because they can smell the money that they're going to make. Where do you start with all of that? Well, he said that Ukraine is a de facto NATO member and a de facto member of the European Union, that it only needs to now be recognized politically to make it official, but is saying that Ukraine is now essentially already a NATO and European Union member country. I suppose that's true. At least now they're beginning to acknowledge and admit these things and admit that maybe this wasn't just a war that was focused on humanitarian things. We know that Biden has made it pretty clear that he'd like regime change in Russia. And we're already seeing attacks on the Russian side of the border. And if you look at the history, the very recent history that has led to this conflict, well, you know that there are very strong arguments to be made that it was NATO and the United States that provoked this by expanding NATO further and further toward Russia's borders. And the red line in the sand was Ukraine, and they didn't care. And in fact, I think they intentionally went in there because they knew it would lead to all of this. And so now Ukraine is a de facto NATO country. What do they mean by that? It means not on paper, not through any sort of international law or agreement, but just because of the nature of things and the way things have evolved. It is, in fact, or de facto, a NATO country now, even without the formal political agreements or treaties in place. Fortunately, it isn't a NATO country officially on paper, because if it was, then of course that agreement would kick into place where an attack on one NATO member country is an attack on all. And then we would be at war, would we not? Well, theoretically, it could have easily led to that. You can see clearly here, too, from Zelensky's speech, the defined lines between what the U.S. and NATO and Western countries, what they want, and what is happening on the other side with Russia, the BRICS countries. This is a struggle for not just sovereignty, but a way of living, an approach to the future, with Ukraine now sort of at the center of this green revolution. You heard Zelensky make reference to it, saying that as they rebuild Ukraine, the country will become a leader in green energy. And why is that important? Well, before Russia went in to Ukraine with its special military operation back in February of 2022, the estimates at that time were that it had 500,000 tons of high-quality lithium and vast quantities of rare earth minerals available to be mined, and it was positioned to become a key player in the global transition to green energy. Of course, Russia is a major supplier, a major producer of oil and natural gas. And we're seeing in the West this rapid, accelerated movement toward a green economy, an electrification of the auto industry and all industries, really, even steel production, where they're manufacturing steel with electricity instead of fossil fuels. And you saw and heard, if you looked at that promotional video that ran just before, that propaganda piece that ran just before the beginning of this conference, did you notice the phones, the payment system, the pictures of the people on the phones? They didn't make verbal reference to it, but that's digital tracking. That is giving a nod to a central bank digital currency. And Zelensky, in his address here and at this conference, also indicated that Ukraine is adopting and developing digital technologies exactly like that. Again, it is how shall I put this? Ukraine, I guess they're looking at, as they rebuild this country, or they talk about rebuilding it, they're going to build it in the image of, or according to, this globalist World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, green utopian vision that they have. This is what their goal is, and they'll roll out all of these plans and impose this, what's the word? They'll take that blueprint and they will build on it in Ukraine, and it will become one of the first countries in the world under this scenario, under this plan, this globalist plan, to have all of these measures put in place. It will be a grand experiment in economics and social engineering, and it will play out right there on Russia's doorstep. And it represents a massive economic opportunity, financial opportunity for all of these giant corporations, which are represented there along with other world leaders, government leaders. They're all sitting there side by side with dollar signs in their eyes. They're already getting rich as they send weapons and cash into Ukraine at our expense. And now they're sitting there with even bigger dollar signs in their eyes, talking to each other about how they're going to rebuild the country together. All we have to do is step up and pay for it, folks. We pay the taxes, they get the contracts, they build, they get rich, we get the debt. Zelensky referring to the dam that was blown up, and it isn't clear who did that. Rebuilding power plants, thousands and thousands, probably tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of houses. Rebuilding the mining industry there. All the while, the United States really, I think, shooting itself in the foot, losing sight of the fact that the US dollar is really propped up by petroleum. It is the petrodollar. It has been since the Nixon era. Brace yourselves. This is a foolhardy plan as they transition away from oil. What will prop up the US dollar after that, when Saudi Arabia no longer supports the United States by forcing other countries to purchase oil in US dollars, allowing countries to purchase oil in the Middle East using any currency that they wish, or maybe even gold for that matter? This is a foolish, foolish path forward. If the US dollar is no longer the default world currency, its position as the economic leader globally is doomed. And that means our standard of living will crumble under that enormous debt. But I guarantee you this, as we pay and we suffer, our children and our grandchildren suffer under that crushing, crushing debt, those elites that you saw sitting in the audience there at that Rebuilding Ukraine conference, they'll all still be driving their Rolls Royces, Lamborghinis, and Ferraris. I guarantee that.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Zelensky also in his address made reference to defending democracy. And I have to say, it made me laugh. Keep in mind that Zelensky has canceled the elections there during the war. He has shut down television stations and media outlets that were critical of his regime. And he has jailed journalists who have spoken out against him, who have also been critical of him. He's allowed a kill list to linger on the internet, a kill list that includes the names of literally thousands of journalists, artists, and political activists. Some of them have actually been assassinated. And in spite of mounting public pressure from people within the global peace movement to have that list taken down, Zelensky has ignored those calls for the removal of that Mirotvorets hit list to be removed from the internet. And I'm sorry, I keep mispronouncing that. I just can't wrap my tongue around it. Sometimes so it was back in May, actually, that Gonzalo Lira was arrested by Ukrainian authorities. And he is still in jail tonight. In fact, here's some video that I just pulled back up here just to show you what they did with him. He's been very popular, growing base of support, a lot of followers on especially Twitter. But this is what it looked like back, I think it was May 3rd when they came to arrest him. They went to where he lives. He'd been arrested before, but this time, he's accused of basically being a Russian propagandist. So they hauled him off to jail. He's been incarcerated ever since. Ukrainian authorities trying to make him look bad. Face is blurred, but that's supposed to be him. And I had video back in May without the digitized faces. And not a word from Western leaders about Gonzalo Lira being held on these charges, even though he's a Western journalist. Biden, no comment from them, and asked about it during news conferences. The White House press secretary also basically just sidestepping the issue. Nobody cares. Not anybody that has any power in the West. As far as they're concerned, Gonzalo Lira and many other journalists being held by the Ukrainian regime can rot. Is that democracy? Doesn't seem like it to me. Doesn't seem like it to me. I think of Trudeau and his comment, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Meaning that all Canadians, if you're a Canadian citizen, even if you became a Canadian citizen just through immigration, and maybe you're only a citizen for a month, but if you were taken prisoner in some other country, but you're a Canadian citizen, then according to Trudeau, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. So you get the full weight of the government behind you to support you in the face of any kind of tyranny from other, even foreign governments. But that isn't what they put into practice, is it? Even Trudeau hasn't spoken up for the defense of Gonzalo Lira or any of the other journalists being held captive over in Ukraine. Not a word from him either about the kill list, the hit list. Our position here, because we are a media outlet, is that we're advocates for free speech. We support free media. We believe that a free media is one of the cornerstones of an actual true democracy. That means you don't throw journalists in prison simply because they're critical of you. You don't throw people in the slammer. You don't go after their bank accounts. You don't seize their financial assets just because they're critical of you. And those same tactics are used nation state against nation state now, with the United States, NATO countries seizing financial assets of Russian citizens and Russian companies. We saw the Canadian government engage in just that, just within the last week, actually seizing that cargo jet that had been sitting in storage, which had been prevented from taking off, that Russian jet at Toronto Pearson Airport, and now formally seizing it. And I would say that's a violation of international law as well. So the Canadian government getting in on the act, the United States engaging in exactly that kind of behavior. It's inappropriate, and I think it is a violation of international law. It's only bound to lead to more escalation with the whole conflict over there. And that will come home to roost right here. Make no mistake, we're going to suffer here. We're going to continue to suffer with even higher inflation and more debt, because our government is not done yet. They're going to keep the gravy train a rolling. And that is why they're propping up Biden as well. I think as long as that guy has a pulse, they'll keep him in power. Because it's like, you ever see the movie Weekend at Bernie's? Well, this is Biden, Weekend at Biden's place, I guess, at the White House, where they just basically prop the guy up. Maybe even if he doesn't have a pulse, they'll prop him up. Somebody just asked me, is that a deep fake, Rick, of Zelensky in the chat? They were saying, is that a deep fake of Zelensky or the real thing? Well, I think in that case, it's the real thing. If you look at what that video looked like, you can see with the eye movements and the quality of the video and the lips, the way they're synced. It's, I'd say it's very real. I think that is really Zelensky. But yeah, given the technology these days and what they really want, which is to maintain control and power internationally, yeah, I think if they had the technology and the wherewithal, they certainly have the motivation to just keep Biden alive, even if it is digitally through a deep fake, just to have him prop him up like Weekend at Bernie's. Weekend at Biden's White House. Prop up old Joe. Just put words in his mouth to keep the gravy train in Ukraine a rolling. Okay, so let's take another brief break. I'll be right back, and we'll move on to other news of the day. Don't go away.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
So check this out. This is video of a Ukrainian tank that they were trying to move into some sort of civilian building, apparently to hide it. But check out the flag on this one, man. Just check out this. Oh, yeah. That's interesting, that symbol on the flag there. Let's take a closer look, shall we? Let's see if we can freeze it. Oh, yeah. Sort of a Nazi eagle with a black sun, a Nazi black sun on the underneath. Yeah. That's interesting. No Nazis in Ukraine, though. I guess it's just for decoration. Hide it in this little garage. Oh, but the flag isn't going to fit underneath. That black sun's going to, oh, there it goes. It's going to, will it fit? Yes, it's got a flexible mast. Yeah. I'll freeze it again so you can get a good look at it. You see? New York Times just in the past week acknowledging that Ukraine does have a little bit of a problem with Nazi symbols being used on Ukrainian troops' uniforms and on some of their vehicles, like tanks, light armored vehicles. I don't know. What else does it take to convince people? You show them, and some people just refuse to see, even as you put something right in front of their eyes. But it's right there, folks. Right there. Also, tonight, there was an explosion in Paris. 7 people in critical condition, 9 others in serious condition. This is an explosion in Paris. The cause still has not been determined. There were people here who say that there was a strong smell of gas just before the explosion. It occurred in a building on Place Alphonse Leverin near the Design School of the American Academy of Paris. I've got some video here that we can bring up. Huge amount of damage. So whether this was an accident or something that was done intentionally, don't know yet. Still waiting for information. See what facts we get out of this, what kind of investigation is conducted. Whether it was just a gas leak or something that was intentionally done, we don't know. But a lot of people hurt. And then Elon Musk tweeting this tonight. And this concerns me. This is like, because this is actually being reported in the news. This is something that looks science fiction-y. It looks very Orwellian or worse, but it's a real thing. Genetically engineered cat girls are possible, scientists say, but we lack funding. And this, Elon Musk was sharing this on Twitter, a BBC News article. And that made me click. And I was thinking about this just the other day because we were talking about 3 or 4 nights ago about transhumanism. We were talking about how scientists are saying that, they can basically turn a male into a female or a female into a male using medical technology. We've also talked a lot about the use of DNA technology and selective breeding and actually creating human embryos from just the cell of a human being. Now they're on the verge of doing that. They've actually been able to do it with mice and monkeys, which means they can probably do it with people now too. They're on the cusp of doing that. So you don't need a man and a woman. A scientist can just make a human being. Talking about using that technology to essentially breed humans in pods for organ harvesting. It raises huge ethical questions. If you're creating a human being or a human embryo and you're bringing them to life and growing them for organ harvesting, they actually are talking about this. Should that even be legal? Because at some point you would have to kill the person in order to take the organs. Would they ever become conscious? And now they're talking about this: genetically engineered cat girls. They're not doing it yet, but what they're really talking about is combining human and animal DNA to create hybrids. When you see people at these pride parades marching down the street wearing their cat masks or acting like dogs, how long do you think it's going to be, given this technology that we have to engineer genetics, for people to start lining up to have their DNA altered, their genetics altered, or to have children created with animal DNA so that they can be dog people or cat people or a fish person or a whatever kind of person hybrid thing they want to be? You want a tail? We'll genetically engineer it for you. You want fangs? You want doggy ears? This is what they're actually talking about. And it sounds like it's a crazy thing, which I think it is. It's immoral. But these are mainstream media. But this is the BBC. Look, man, you can just Google it. Cat girls are real and can be created? ? Here, look. Just bring it up in Google. This is how close we are to actually having this stuff happen. Genetically engineered cat girls may be a popular concept in anime and manga, but in reality, the answer is no. There is currently no technology or scientific evidence to support the creation of genetically engineered cat girls. However, genetic modification technology has advanced significantly in the past. And then if you go down here, are cat girls possible? Can you bioengineer girls with cat DNA? Quora, the answer is not possible now, but they may become possible in the future when we get bioengineering up to that level. And then there are all these other stories about it. Genetically engineered cat girls. And apparently even Elon Musk has talked about creating robotic engineered cat girls. It says right here, Elon Musk says he could make cat girl sex robots. To SpaceX and Tesla CEO Elon Musk, the future is teeming with humanoid robots. This is on The Bite. So he was having a conversation with Ted's the TED Talk people, right? Chris Anderson. And he said in this interview, and this actually goes back a while. I don't remember what the date was on this. But anyway, he says, predictably, the conversation jumped directly to the sexual implications of humanoid androids. Despite his busy personal schedule, Musk clearly does have time to daydream. He said, it's probably inevitable. After being asked if robots could ever become romantic or sex partners. He says, I mean, I did promise the internet that I'd make cat girls. He added, we could make a robot cat girl. Musk has repeatedly talked about his infatuation with cat girls, which are fictional human female characters with cat ears, tails, and whiskers, often portrayed in anime and manga. Social conditioning, social engineering, folks. In 2019, he joked that an upcoming Tesla software feature would not only blow customers' minds, but it'd also be a crucial step towards cat girls. Well, Musk is clearly having a laugh by bringing a weird meme to an otherwise earnest conversation. Tesla is indeed working on a humanoid robot called Optimus. And then the article continues and says that so far, all we've seen is a performer in a black and white jumpsuit dancing on stage at the company's AI Day event. Well, they've gone a little bit further than that. A lot further. And of course, they're talking about prototypes. And if you've ever seen Blade Runner, they explore some of the issues and the ethics that surround androids that look like humans, mimic humans, become so advanced that you can't tell the difference. Can you fall in love with an android, an artificial life? Could two androids fall in love with each other if they're programmed with artificial intelligence? In fact, in Blade Runner, was Deckard the main character, the android hunter? Was he an android himself? Got to go back and watch that movie again. And in anime, you do see these cat girls out on the streets. You see people. It's becoming, I think, a more widespread fetish. People who dress up like dogs and cats. And I think they act like dogs and cats. You've seen it. You know what I'm talking about. And yes, hybrids, humans, and animals. And we know that we know that they've been experimenting with that. It's a fact. The island of Dr. Moreau coming to life. This is really at the core of a lot of what is driving the polarization in our society. This is the split where some people want to go to remain on a path of nature, and other people want to take this path of technology. Freedom versus, I guess, an artificial future where you become beholden to, I would say almost enslaved to the technology. In many respects, you do become enslaved to it. Natural, artificial. Organic, digital. Is there a middle ground? I would say yes. Technology over here, I would say it's like on the organic, natural side, that's also the industrial side. That's where, you've had the Industrial Revolution, which brought with it automation, assembly lines, steel, the steel industry, the internal combustion engine, oil, fossil fuels, organic energy. Now you're getting a transformation or an attempted transformation by people who believe that they can control everything through collectivism, a political ideology that superimposes government controls over everything from the economy to the environment, where they believe they can control the environment. They believe they can even send rockets off to Mars and terraform the entire planet, transform the environment there into something that would sustain human life, or build giant cities under domes where people would live. And even though they say that the environment here is being destroyed by man-made activity, they also talk about and engage in the development of technology to control climate. And they want to control every aspect of everything. And to them, everything is a construct. It's not about reality. It's about you can be anything you want to be. If you want to be male, you can be male. If you want to be female, you can be female. You want to switch? We have the surgery and the hormones to do that. You want to be a cat person? I would know at some point they'll probably, if they can't genetically modify you, maybe they'll just graft cat ears onto the top of your head using plastic surgery. They'll make you into, construct you into, mold you into whatever you want to be. They think they can control everything, including the economy. They think what goes up doesn't have to come down. They think that they can control morality or mortality. When you reject God, all these things then are on the table, because the morality surrounding it is destroyed. So you can then engage in whatever activity you want to engage in without feeling guilty or sinful. The ethics surrounding it change because the ethics themselves become a construct, something that they can mold into anything they want them to be. Is it right or wrong? Well, who's to judge? The people, not a higher power, because they don't think that that higher power exists. That's why over here you have people who believe that our rights come from a higher place and that we're governed really ultimately by God, whoever your God might be. And even the people who maybe don't believe in God, if God is still part of the equation, then even those people who don't believe are still protected by the premise that our rights, as laid out in our constitutions, come from above, from a higher power, not a man. But over here, the people who believe in a construct in collectivism, who believe that the government can control everything, that our rights come from government, that come from a man or a dictator or a prime minister or a president or a Congress or a parliament or a Senate or some human. To those people, they then think that gives them the power. When I was a kid growing up, I often heard people, and my parents even, refer to the church and the state. And so many people would say, you know, I believe in God, but I also believe in the separation of church and state. And so many people advocated for that, but that is also because there was such a push on, in the 1960s, the 1970s, toward more and more and more socialism. And in order to facilitate that, and so facilitate that collectivist ideology, along with that came the idea of the separation of church and state. And that portion of all of that, in my view, that was a critical mistake, because as people embraced that concept, out of schools came the whole concept of God, to the point now where through social engineering, we're being told that we can't have that anymore. Because why? Because some people might find that offensive. And because if God is being injected into the educational institutions and into government, that becomes a threat to the authority, to the sovereignty, to the power of the state. It diminishes the power of the state. Government doesn't like that. And even though there are specific references to our rights coming from God in our constitutions and in Canada, it's through the Bill of Rights and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, even though there are specific references to it, government rejects it. When you have a secular society, when you have someone like Trudeau or Biden in charge and their regimes or administrations in place, That stuff goes out the windows. They don't respect what the churches have to say. They don't respect religion. They don't respect the true rule of law. They, in their view, through their legislation and through the Charter and through the Bill of Rights and through the Constitution of the United States of America, they think that they give us our rights. Because those documents, in my view, those documents are meant to protect our rights as given from above. They acknowledge what those rights are, and it's really the government's job to protect those rights, with the caveat that as a community and a society, there is always some degree of reasonable limitation that is imposed through the rule of law to prevent people from doing things that they ought not do, or to protect society as a whole. So yes, everyone has these rights, and government, through the power of the people, through the collective agreement or the social contract, if you will, if you go back and look at your ancient philosophy, social contract between the people and the government, the people ultimately collectively decide that, yes, we have to have these certain limitations on our rights and freedoms in order to facilitate a truly free society. In other words, if there's a fire down at the end of a street, yes, police do have the right to restrict the movements of some people because a building might blow up. And so they're saying, don't go down that street, folks, because it's dangerous for everyone to go down there right now. So stay back behind this barricade. We're going to keep you safe. And then everybody in the community says, yes, we agree that that's a reasonable limit to put on people's ability to move and travel. You can't travel down that street right now because that building's about to blow up. That's a reasonable limit to place on people's freedoms. And we all agree on that. That's just one example. But when government steps beyond that, when they go too far, then you get what we have now, and that is pushback. And why has government done that? Because they failed to recognize or respect our actual rights, because they've rejected the concept, maybe the reality of a higher power, of God. So they think they have the ultimate power, and until those concepts, those ideologies, that relationship with God is restored, I think we're going to continue to have problems with our institutions, with our court system. People say the court system is corrupt. It isn't so much just that it's corrupt, it's that people as a community have embraced the idea and have accepted the idea that ultimately our rights come from government, not from God, including the judges. So that's why you're getting the rulings that you're getting right now, where the decisions to not even hear specific cases. It isn't that money's changing hands all the time. It's a change in attitude, a change in the community standard. And through the legal system as well, there is always a community standard that is applied. And those things are in flux all the time. All through history, that's been the case. And from generation to generation, even decade to decade, you'll see a shift in the community standard, whether it's about, it could be a variety of things, but I'll use the strip club example as a prime example of how community standards change, and therefore the interpretation of laws and the enforcement of laws changes to mesh with the current community standards, so that if you go back to, say, the 1960s or 1970s, a lot of strip clubs would force, say, and if you have kids, maybe close their ears or send them off into another room for a minute or whatever. You don't want to hear this, but back in those days, in the strip clubs, the dancers would need to wear like a G-string, or they'd have to have certain parts of clothing on in order to meet the community standard. And so if they took those pieces of clothing off, went down to a certain point, depending on what jurisdiction you're in, what state, province, city, even based on bylaws, those dancers might be arrested and charged with lewd behavior or some other morality law. But as things have progressed and society has become more tolerant, if you will, or accepting of more risque behavior, the clothing started to come off and there were arrests made and challenges made. And often you'll hear, especially in Canada, references made to what the community standard is at any given time. And so those rulings changed, and the precedents, the legal precedents that came out of court cases as they evolved over time would change as well. And that's why some of the legislation or laws really haven't changed at all, but the interpretation of those laws has over time. And so now when you go to a strip club, not that I've been to a strip club in a long time, but I know that the rules have changed and they're much more lax. So you don't see the arrest. It's not even in the news now. You don't even hear about it. Instead, we hear, about the drag queen story times. And that's the cultural issue that is front and center right now. But if you go back to the 70s and even the 80s, it was those strip club cases that kept popping up. And if it wasn't that, even look at the issue of pornography, where back in the 1970s, that stuff was completely illegal. You couldn't get the explicit material anywhere. If you were caught with it, you could actually be charged if you were selling it in a store. When I was in high school, I remember them showing us a documentary called Not a Love Story. And that's because there was this, underground market and production factory of adult material that was explicit, but it wasn't available for retail distribution legally anywhere. But then over time, the community standards changed. And then the material was censored, but was more available. And there was licensing for video stores. And I know in our jurisdiction here where I live, the provincial government imposed laws where they had to have license stickers attached to every video that they had in a video store in the adult section. It was called the Ontario Film Review Board, the OFRB. And every single video, they had to sit and get this. This is hilarious, actually, if you think about it. So all the censors who were trying to suppress all of the pornography, they had to sit in a room and watch all of the porn, every single one of them, to determine if it exceeded or went past beyond the community standard. And if it did, then they would order certain scenes edited out, and then they would affix a regulatory license sticker to every single video that was approved for distribution through video chains and video stores in the province. But the censors had to sit and watch all the porn. What'd you do today, honey, at the office? Oh, I just sat and watched porn all day. Okay, let's go to church. That was what was going on back in the day. Well, now today I know you can get just anything you want online. It's even on Twitter, for crying out loud. Hardcore, explicit, adult material. And it's just instantly available. And yet there were so many court cases back in those days, but that's because the community standards have changed. And it's also because the technology has changed as well. And it has sort of forced that issue front and center. And it's made it more and more difficult for government to control the flow of that content. Occasionally now you see challenges to, I don't know if you would call it the morality, but it's certainly the standard. It's a new kind of morality that they're trying to impose on the adult industry, though, because the challenges have been coming more from sort of the feminist side, the progressive side occasionally, but it hasn't been that aggressive. Sometimes they've challenged it. I've seen just in the past couple of years, a couple of indications of that kind of activity where I know that the the Pornhub site, there was a legal challenge launched against them by a feminist group And that was about a year ago, but it didn't get a lot of attention. And I think that's because on the progressive side, the neoliberal side, they embrace promiscuity. But everything, even there, in the social engineering, the community standard has changed because it's all pro promiscuity, but it has to come, it's only allowed to, the lewdness, the explicit material, it really has to come from these days to be endorsed, if you will. It has to come from the progressive side. It has to come from the feminist side, the gay community side. It's okay if you're a neoliberal. If you're a liberal and you're engaging in that kind of activity, it's okay. But if you're on the conservative side and you engage in that kind of activity, far less accepted, even if it's the exact same kind of material. And I would say as well that there's this concept of the patriarchy. And so, and the traditional, I'll say traditional, sort of Playboy-esque kind of sexuality that has been portrayed in our society that, became prominent through Hugh Hefner back in the 1950s. But the acceptance of that has diminished. So the Playboy now is strangely, even though it isn't the most explicit material, it's rejected by the progressive left today as being sexist. And yet you go pick up a Cosmopolitan magazine, which is aimed at women, made for women, directed at a female market, and always has articles in there that are progressive oriented, very liberal, pro-feminist, but the imagery, the photography, the explicit nature of the material, and even the articles themselves, which are talking about sex in very explicit terms, more explicit in many respects than even Playboy, that's all okay. It's a totally different social construct. And so you could take a picture out of Cosmopolitan today and put it into Playboy, and it wouldn't be accepted in Playboy, but if it's in Cosmopolitan, it's okay. It's a strange observation, but it's actually very true. And so I'm not exactly sure how I got on this rant, but just changing standards. And I think that from that, here's the positive takeaway. And I think this is really kind of the important thing that I need to illustrate or drive home here, is that even though today things may not be the way you want them to be, it's important to recognize that the social standard, the community standard changes. Things are always in a state of flux. And so, while things may not be good today in your view, things can change tomorrow. And sometimes, while we wait and wait and wait and wait for change, and it seems like it's slow and never going to get here, after it is slow over time arriving, suddenly it just arrives very quickly, sometimes without you even really noticing. So don't give up hope, because the pendulum tends to swing back and forth and back and forth. Change can come. It's actually inevitable. And I think as the world becomes crazier and crazier and crazier, if we just stick to our guns, I think people ultimately will stick to their guns. And I mean that in a metaphorical way. They'll stand their ground and they'll say, this is not good for me. It's not good for my community. And ultimately, people will push back and say, no, we're not interested in that. That's not working. And it'll be rejected. A lot of these things are experiments. We'll see what happens in Ukraine with this huge flow of money. We'll see what happens here as they try to transform our economies, our societies, our communities. Which path will we choose? Will we choose this digital, artificial, synthetic future where our vaccines are engineered in a lab using mRNA technology instead of using traditional methods where they actually take a piece of an organic virus, a piece of organic material, and build a vaccine around that. No, they're actually engineering digitally, synthetically, these new vaccines. That's basically what it is. It's like the difference between a synthetic oil and an organic oil, motor oil, only more synthetic even. So you've got a future that you embrace where it's like everything is synthetic and digital. Artificial intelligence, transhumanism, genetic modification, lithium ion electric batteries to power electric vehicles with computers at the core and digital tracking and central bank digital currencies, or an organic, more organic, industrial, linear, non-digital or only partially digital, limited digital future where we put the brakes on some of this technology a little bit, slow it down to make sure that it doesn't turn us into something we're not. I want to stay human. I'm not so keen on becoming a hybrid. I have no interest in altering my DNA, and I sure hope that my grandkids or my great-grandkids, assuming that I ever have any, I sure hope that they're human, not just transhuman. And I don't think I want to stick around in a transhuman, digital, artificial form, even if it is some sort of life, because whatever that might be, as I've said before, it wouldn't really be me, because as much as they think they can control things, they're missing the key ingredient. And it all comes back to God, because the one thing I know that they cannot recreate, no matter how hard they try, is the human soul.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
So for our Canadian viewers, I'm just going to comment very briefly on something that happened this past week. There were some by-elections federally that took place across the country. Really, they were kind of inconsequential in that nothing really changed in terms of the power structure with the government in Canada as a result of those. And by-elections are held because members of parliament step aside. They quit or whatever, for whatever reason, they leave office during the term of a government. So they have to have by-elections there to decide who the new MPs, members of parliament, end up being. So these by-elections were held. And the one that was of most note was in the riding of Portage-Lisker in Manitoba. And that is where the People's Party of Canada was hoping to obtain their first seat, get their first member of parliament elected. So they parachuted in the leader, Maxime Bernier. And the reason they did that was because in that riding, it was it was the best riding, aside from Bernier's own riding where he lost in Quebec. It was the best, the riding where the PPC had the best showing across Canada, as I understand it. So the person who ran in 21 garnered, I think it was 21% of the vote there. And that's because that riding is traditionally pretty conservative. So a lot of the conservatives voted for the PPC, but they still elected a conservative member of parliament. So Bernier, being the leader of the party, they thought they could parachute him in and he would have a really good shot at securing that riding and winning. Well, they had the election and things didn't quite go the way that the PPC had been planning or hoping. So as a result, the Conservative cruised to victory pretty easily out there. Brendan Leslie, the Conservative candidate, I think he got about 65% of the total vote. And I don't think Maxime Bernier, even though he's the leader of the party and they had an aggressive campaign and they injected a lot of money and a lot of effort into trying to get Bernier elected there, the leader of the PPC, I don't think he did as well as the local candidate did. I think he came up just a little bit short. He was only in at about 19. He claims he had about 20% support. He only managed to garner about just over 4,000 votes total in the riding. So it's there's a big question mark, I think, hanging over the People's Party of Canada at this point. I said, that I thought that what they were engaged in out there was not a winning strategy. I don't think they were focused on the right issues. I don't think they talked enough about the economy. I don't think that they, I think they misread at this point what their true base of support is, or even should be, or could be. I don't think they understand their own party at this point and who the people are who are truly supporting them. They view themselves as the party that was created in the beginning still, and it is not. The PPC created sort of as an offshoot of the Conservative Party of Canada. And that's when Bernier ran for the leadership, came up just short by 1%, lost the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, and left to form his own party. We've seen splits in the conservative movement in Canada before through parties like the Reform Party, for instance. And that in some ways was unhealthy at the time, but then was very healthy when there was reunification of people in the conservative side. They called it, from time to time when this has happened, the Unite the Right movement. And then the conservatives would come back together in force. And that's when you had ultimately the formation of government through Stephen Harper. When Reform came back into the fold and conservatives became more cohesive, and it gave them a path to victory electorally. Well, now at the PPC, I don't see that happening because the PPC is not the Reform Party. And Bernier made reference to the Reform Party during his campaign and encouraged people to vote for him, saying, this could be just like the Reform Party. And we get me elected here, and that'll give us a foothold, and then we'll be off to the races, essentially, just like the Reform Party was, which then led to the Canadian Alliance and then ultimately to the creation of the Conservative Party of Canada and the reunification of the right hand, the right and the right. But that's not what's going on right now. That's not it at all. It's a totally different animal. It is not the Reform Party. It is not the same political scenario. The landscape is entirely different. The mood of the country is entirely different. And the PPC base is not what it was when it began. It's a populist party. It's not a conservative party. And I don't think even Maxime Bernier truly understands what that is. That's why he lost. He was focused on the wrong issues. He said the wrong things. His campaign was not successful because it was poorly focused, poorly planned, poorly executed, even though they spent a bunch of money. And I think it's time, and I don't mean this I mean this in a constructive way. They need to reevaluate everything. They need to revise the party, revise the platform, get refocused, and decide what it is they truly want to do. Are they really in it to win it? Or is there some other motivation behind what the party is? It's a protest party, largely. They protest a lot, but they don't win. And how much losing are you prepared to go through if you're going to continue to support a political party? How much losing are you prepared to endure? At some point, you got to have some wins. So they need to come up with a way to win. They need a winning strategy. They need to reevaluate. They're focused on the wrong things. Honestly, they don't get it. They've lost sight of a path to victory. I think they had it. I kept saying nope. But you know what? They don't listen to me. Good luck, PPC.
Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so just a couple of other stories to touch on here. Let me just, I need to stop some audio from playing in my head. Sorry, just need to click a couple more buttons. Here we go. Okay, so a January 6th rioter has been sentenced to more than 12 years in jail. He is said to have used a stun gun on a police officer. Those are the charges. Daniel Joseph Rodriguez pled guilty earlier this year to multiple felony counts that were lodged against him. And reportedly admitted to the FBI that he drove a stun gun into the neck of a Metropolitan Police Department officer by the name of Michael Fanone. There was a video of this portion, this incident within the incident, I guess. And of course, you have two sets of stories, surrounding what happened on January 6th. But the government keeping a lot of those J6ers still in jail, and this guy sentenced now to 12 years, over 12 years in jail. Also, you may remember Jack Teixeira, the Air National Guardsman, who has been accused of leaking classified documents online. Well, he has entered a plea of not guilty. He's charged with 6 counts of willful retention and transmission of national defense information. He was indicted by a grand jury earlier this month. Teixeira's family has issued a statement, and in it they say, quote, "We remain as committed as ever, and our entire family continues to share complete and unwavering support of Jack. Jack will now have his day in court, and as we move through this process, we are hopeful that Jack will be getting the fair and just treatment he deserves. We realize there is a long road ahead, and we ask for your continued respect for our privacy during this difficult ordeal. So Teixeira is accused of, I guess, taking advantage of or abusing a security clearance and then posting documents that were classified on social media. And according to the Department of Social Justice, he allegedly revealed the kinds of military equipment that the United States was going to be using in Ukraine, including information on how that equipment would be transferred and how that equipment would be used when it arrived in Ukraine. So Teixeira has been in custody since he was arrested back in April. And the trial will commence. And the next court date is set for August 9th via telephone. And if he is convicted, he could go to jail for 10 years. In other news, the FTC sues Amazon. They allegedly tricked millions of users into purchasing Prime subscriptions. So the Federal Trade Commission today sued Amazon for allegedly using deceitful tactics. And I don't know if you have a Prime account or not, but if you do have one, I wonder, were you tricked into getting it? But it says this has been going on for years. And it's been an effort to trick millions of customers into enrolling in its Prime subscription service. They made it complicated, according to these allegations, for customers to cancel their subscription membership in an effort to enhance sales. You know, we see a lot of that with tech companies, cable companies, telephone companies. So this suit filed in the Western District of Washington alleges that certain Amazon executives all took part in making it more difficult or making it difficult for Amazon consumers to opt out of renewing or signing up for their Prime subscriptions. And in these allegations in this legal document, they say it's because those changes would also negatively affect Amazon's bottom line. That's the allegation. And it goes on and it says, Amazon tricked and trapped people into recurring subscriptions without their consent, not only frustrating users, but also costing them significant money. That according to FTC Chair Lena Khan, who went on and said that these manipulative tactics harm consumers and law-abiding citizens alike. And, you know, I can go back and I can tell you that the phone company in Canada is it's terrible, terrible company. I'm going to give you a specific example. This is a personal thing that happened to me. And my parents, elderly, they had a landline. They've had the landline for years and years and years. And they started to have some trouble with it, as I recall. Anyway, there was a better way, and there was a better phone deal available on the market, and they could keep their existing phone number. Now, my dad, you know, he doesn't have a cell phone, and he doesn't want a cell phone, and he relies on his landline. So I made arrangements to have the phone switched over. And in the course of doing that, it was difficult to get the phone company, Bell Media now, but Bell being the phone company traditionally, now a giant media corporation owning a variety of media assets. But they've had that same phone number since I've been alive, essentially. Well, just about. You know, easily since the 1970s. It's the exact same phone number. So when I called to have the service canceled and then transferred to this other company, I was reviewing their bill and started to talk about what they would have to pay out in order to get out of this landline. And to my horror, I discovered that they had been paying a fee on their phone bill since the 1970s. You see, I remember that they at one time, there was a rotary dial phone in the house when I was a little kid. And then touch tone came out, the push button phones. So you had to pay a fee, a touch tone fee. They charged people back in the 1970s if you had a touch tone phone. Well, there we were. What year was it? 2020, maybe 2020 or 2021 when that was switched over. And I found out that they were still charging my parents a touch tone fee. If you got a new phone line, a new landline with the phone company, Bell, at that time, you wouldn't pay a touch tone fee. But because my parents had signed on back in the 1970s, they'd been charging them every month since the 1970s, a touch tone fee on their phone bill. Never took it off, just kept on charging them, where other people were not paying it if they came online or had a new contract or whatever. They're just a subscription, or it's not even like a cell phone contract. It's just, you just had your phone. They just sent you a monthly bill. And Bell Media was charging my parents a touch tone fee. Absolutely ridiculous. Just a made up fee, essentially. No additional expense to the phone company. It's all digital now. All that information flowing out from the phones, it's all digitized. Touch tone fees? Give me a break. Do you know how much money that cost my parents over the years? How many other elderly people out there even today are probably still paying a touch tone fee with Bell Media? Talk about immoral. We're going to wrap it up early tonight, folks. It's 10 after 8. And on that note, I thank you all for watching this evening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Please hit that like button. And if you subscribe on YouTube, please hit the notification bell. That helps us out a lot. Also, subscribe over on Rumble if you would. It's very important. You'll notice that the RFK Jr. Video that we produced last night is down off YouTube. That's all happening because of censorship issues and concerns about having that channel taken down. So if you want to see that content, you'll have to go over to the Rumble channel to see it now. And as we move forward and we continue to offer that kind of content, we may need to dump out of YouTube and make it available, maybe even exclusively on Rumble, but certainly on some of the other platforms. I'm not sure about. Twitter's not so much of an issue. Facebook can be, but YouTube, big concerns there. So Rumble, go subscribe there. We're growing over there. We need Rumble. We need to have that firing on all cylinders because that is the free speech platform. And just a reminder that you can also support the channel by donating, and we do need the help, at maverickdonations.com. You can donate there, or you can also go to this URL, this website address, freedomreporters.com. That will take you directly to the donation page at that location. Or you can also, while we're still live, you can donate through the Rumble rants over on the Rumble channel. But we are demonetized on YouTube, so be it. That's the way life is. But we will be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the Maverick News Channel. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and spending your time here with me tonight. It's been an absolute privilege. Catch you on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.